The RailBlaza C-Tug helps you move your kayak effortlessly. I've fished out of a heavy fishing kayak for several years, dragging it along the rocks, getting it to places that just weren't very accessible, but it was actually damaging my kayak. And so I tried the Amazon specials, the cheap ones, and I was super frustrated because every time I started to move, it would fold up, it would collapse, and it just didn't work at all with my kayak. I'd given up all hope until I saw the RailBlaza C-Tug Cart, and I was willing to give it a chance. So I ordered a C-Tug Kayak Cart and got to testing it, pulling it uphill, pulling it downhill, running it over big chunk rock, running it on gravel, grass, thoroughly ensuring that it was gonna work for my needs. So here are my honest thoughts on the RailBlaza C-Tug Kayak Cart. First of all, the price is spot on. I've bought the cheap Amazon ones, like I said, and they didn't work. I spent, you know, 50 bucks on them, whatever it was. Wasn't what it said it was gonna be. It folded up on me, they just fell apart. They might have been compact and cheap, but they just didn't hold up. This one's right at around $100 to $150 depending on where you get it exactly, but it's held up and it's built fairly well for that price. Now granted, not everybody wants to spend $100 to $150 on a kayak cart, but I think it's money well spent because you're actually saving from damaging your kayak. So it was pretty easy justifying it in my mind, especially since that there are other more expensive carts on the market. As I mentioned, I've tested a couple different kayaks with this and haven't had any problems as far as, you know, difficulty switching between each other. There was virtually no adjustment. The only thing you've got to do is take the strap off and put the strap back on and you're good to go. So as far as like having to take time to adjust it if you've got two different kayaks or anything, no. I really like that about it. So you're not having to be like, well, I've got one really wide kayak and a narrow kayak, one heavy kayak, one light kayak. They both work, at least they did for me. So this isn't like a specialty item for one single kayak. So another thing that I really like about it is just how fast it breaks apart and is put back together. I'm just gonna break it apart real quick to show you how simple it really is. You just pop the top off here. Here's another one if I can get it loose. Pop the pin, straighten, pull the wheel off. Pop the other pin, straighten, pop the wheel off. I leave this together. You can break it apart, but honestly, when you break it apart, it doesn't save you that much room or that much time. And it's a struggle to get apart when it's still pretty new. That's honestly why I just haven't been breaking apart. If you want to break this apart, you can. It comes in two pieces. I think that's just another piece you got to keep up with. So I keep it like this. But that brings me to my next point, is that it's fairly compact. You know, you've got two pretty big wheels here. You've got the two parts that the kayak actually sets on. I'm blanking on what they're actually called right now. And then you've got the main frame, and that's it. And I like that because there's no loose pieces. The pins stay connected to the main frame. The kickstand's pretty cool. Overall, the design and compactness of it was pretty good. And then putting it back together is just as simple as taking it apart. Make sure your pin's straight, plop it in, lock it into place. I like it because you do hear that click and you know that it's secured. Flip it over, do the same thing there. There's the loud click, flip it. These are pretty simple. Come in from the side like that, fold it down, and it's secured. Same thing, up here like this, roll it over, fold it down, boom, ready to go. Ready to set your kayak on it that quick. So one thing that I noticed with other kayaks is that they use inflatable wheels, which might be great for the sand, but for me, dragging over sharp rocks and stuff, they're gonna go flat. Well, with these wheels, you don't gotta worry about them going flat. It would honestly take a lot to even puncture it and cut it through. It's fairly thick rubber, which is what I like, but yet it's still not too heavy. When I set my kayak on it, it does have a little bit of give and you can kind of see them squish down, but it doesn't make it so much that there's a lot of friction and it's hard to move. The reason I like these wheels so much too is because they've worked in multiple terrains. You know, I've taken them over big chunk rocks, works great. I've taken it in this grass, backed it around, turned it around, everything works great. And then I've taken it onto the sand and the kind of pebbly gravel stuff, and it works great. I've yet to find a terrain where these don't work. The one thing that they might not work in so great would be like super soft mud. But at that point, dragging a kayak's gonna suck anyways, because if these wheels are sinking, you're probably sinking in the mud and it's just gonna make a miserable time. But other than that, I really don't know a terrain that these wheels won't work in. And overall, I've been really impressed with them. So I mentioned a couple times that I fish from a very heavy kayak, which means that it's pretty difficult to actually move and drag. It makes dragging it miserable. However, the RailBlaza C-Tug Kayak Cart has changed how easy it is to move my heavy kayak. Loaded down, my kayak probably weighs over 100 pounds, and now I can pretty much move it effortlessly. Whereas if I had to drag it 20, 30 yards, I was dying out of breath and just sitting there huffing puffing. Now, not so much. I can move it there, walk back, load my stuff up, and get fishing a whole lot faster than I would have trying to drag it any amount at all. So if you're looking for a way to effortlessly move your heavy kayak, or even a light kayak, maybe you just don't like dragging it or it's awkward to carry, this solves that problem. Now, with that said, there are a couple of things that I'm not too fond of. And the first one is that it's primarily made out of all plastic. There are a couple metal parts in it and the wheels are rubber. However, the rest of it seems like plastic, and those clips that need to pop into place and lock, I'm just thinking one day they're gonna break. Now granted, after several months of use, they still look really good, but I'm thinking longevity over the years, I would like to see something a little less plasticky. Another thing has to do with the kickstand. It's okay and it does its job, but it doesn't do its job great. Sometimes the weight of the cart itself will cause the kickstand to just fall over and it doesn't hold it up, which makes putting your kayak on it a little more difficult. There actually is a bolt that you can tighten that would probably solve most of this problem, so it's not a huge deal, but just something to be aware of. Now, because it is pretty well built and sturdy, it is kind of bulky when you're hauling it in your kayak. Now, I typically leave it in the back of my truck, and this isn't a huge con for me, but for those of you that like to pack it with you in your kayak, it's gonna take up quite a bit of room just because the wheels are pretty bulky, the main frame's fairly bulky, so it's gonna replace some of the extra fishing gear that you're gonna wanna bring along with you. So the last con that I found was that you really need to strap it onto your kayak. Now on flat ground, I really didn't have a problem with it. It was when I was going uphill and downhill that the kayak and the cart just would disconnect, meaning that there's nothing there but friction holding it on. And so you really have to strap it on, which isn't a big deal at all. If you're only going 20, 30 yards, you probably can get away with it unless it's just a steep hill. But if you're going any further than that, strap it on. It doesn't have to be tight. It comes with the straps. So it's super easy to do. So yes, it's a con, but it was designed that way, so I can't really knock it. I just was hoping to, you know, get away with being as lazy as possible, drop it on there and go. Now, another RailBlaza product that I've been impressed with was the gear hub. And I actually haven't been fishing without it since I've got it because I like it that much. And if you want to find out why I like it that much, you can check out this video right here where I give you all the pros and cons of the RailBlaza gear hub, and I can't wait to see you there.